Hello everyone. Hello, it's Sarah Dallal. I'm very, very excited to be here today. I feel like it's been a while since I've been on camera, but also I never usually am on camera on Fridays. But enough about me, I'm not the star of the show. My guest today needs a proper introduction. I'm incredibly honoured to share Friday with him and get his valuable insight. Dr. Michael Bankole is a politics lecturer at King's College in London, with many of his work and research centred around racism and representation in British politics. I'm super excited to get his analysis, as I'm sure many of you are too. Massive fan of Mike. So Mike, how are you? The 4-day weekend is among us. So how are you doing?
Oh, I'm so great. I'm firstly so happy to be on the show. I've been watching from afar for a while, so happy to be here and share the stage with you. It's going to be a fun show, I'm sure.
It is going to be a fun show. It's always a fun show when we're slandering reform. So actually, yeah,
Yeah,
I am
I love it.
excited for that. Yeah, super exciting to have him on the show. So what we've got coming up tonight is we've got two reform stories, unfortunately for you, but was looking at Farage triple locking the state pensions. Is he pandering to the pensioners? Who knows? Our second story is also surrounding Farage sacking the housing chief over the Grenfell comments. And our last story is on Restore Britain, lying to young people. But you can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p. But on to our first story. Reform leader Nigel Farage has just committed to maintaining the triple lock on pensions if Reform UK win the next election. And on the surface, that sounds entirely reasonable because people who've worked their whole lives should be able to retire with dignity, right? It shouldn't be controversial, but let's have a look at what he said.
For me, what decided it was, number one, there are a lot of older pensioners who got their pensions before 2016 who are really pretty disadvantaged by the current system. Secondly, that the people to whom pensions are being paid, in vast majority, certainly compared to a younger generation today, are those that have actually worked and paid into the system, and we are very much the party of alarm clock Britain, those that work, and therefore should reap rewards later in life. But the third and most decisive reason is that within the next 2 weeks, we are going to announce the biggest cuts to the benefits bill ever seen in the history of this country. So when questions get asked in a minute, how can you afford it? Well, we can afford it many, many times over, given what we're going to announce within the next fortnight.
Take like a shot every single time someone wants to come for those who are on universal credit or on benefits. It's getting really boring at this point. But let's just stick to the pensioners for now. On the surface, it sounds pretty fair. People will lap it up because it sounds like he's defending people who have contributed to society and deserve security in old age. And to be clear, people absolutely should be able to retire with dignity after working, for as long as they have. But this is Farage we're talking about. So let's sift through the BS a little bit, guys, because the way he's framing that argument really matters, because it's doing something much more political beneath the surface. Because yes, people contributed, but no, they did not build up their own individual pot with their name on it. The UK state pension is not a private savings account. It's basically like a pay-as-you-go system where today's workers fund today's pensioners and future workers will fund those retiring in years to come. It's a collective system built on an ongoing social contract between generations. So when politicians use language about people having paid into the system as if they have a personal entitlement stored up for themselves, what they're really doing is moralising entitlement and setting up the idea that some groups are more worthy of support than others. And once you introduce that sort of logic, it doesn't stop at pensions, does it? And we know that because we already see exactly how that framing is being extended. Look at Generic confirming what it is I'm about to unpack in a second.
In my experience, younger people want their parents and their grandparents to have a decent retirement. And it seems to me there's quite a lot of people who have pretty comfortable lives who seem to want to take away a decent state pension from people who are finding life actually very difficult at the moment. It's not easy to live on £230 a week, particularly when everyone's bills are going through the roof at the moment. And we should be looking after those people. And that is a sentiment that, in fact, all the evidence suggests people of all generations share, particularly people who understand what it's like living in tough circumstances like that. But if you're asking me how can we help young people to have better lives, well, reform is very clear. We want to get good jobs back into the country. We want to get some economic growth going again. And you do that with a different energy policy to the one that's happened in recent years, which has deindustrialized the country and is making us uncompetitive. We want to ensure that we can get building again so that there are more homes for young people, something that is clearly failing at the moment, where the government is miles off its target, and all governments of recent times have failed to deliver enough. And we want to put the interests of British young people first. I think a British young person, like everyone in this country, would be astonished to see the tens of billions of pounds that are being spent on illegal migration, on benefits for people who aren't even British citizens. Our approach is going to make the public finances more sustainable, get good jobs going for young people, but I think most young people in this country would agree with us that the first port of call for savings is not the elderly, is not their parents and their grandparents.
It feels like he's when someone's trying to fill in like a word count in an essay, he just said so much but didn't say anything at all. And it's not new when it comes from the likes of Generic and stuff, and just reformers as a whole. But then you've got people like Sophie who make you feel really grateful. They make you feel really grateful for having a few brain cells that don't always fight each other. She says, young people, pensioners, getting a pension, they can live off after working their whole damn lives, is not an attack on us. It is the hotel dwellers and those that can't be asked to work, that we have to pay for, that are the problem. That is the actual unfairness here. Arguing that pensioners are not the problem and that the real unfairness comes from migrants in asylum hotels or people who supposedly cannot be bothered to work is so surface level, and like it encapsulates what Twitter's all about, to be honest. Reem Ibrahim responded with this and said the state pension is £146 billion, asylum seeker hotels are £2.1 billion. I do think it's a rarish win from Ibrahim, but I still think she's reinforcing that narrative by comparing £146 billion spent on pensioners with £2.1 billion spent on asylum accommodation, because there are going to be people who are angry at both, as if those two figures exist on the same scale of political significance. But call me controversial, but I'm sick and tired of the pandering to old people. They have lived very, very different lives to young people, very different lives to a lot of us. So maybe we should get some violins out for the pensioners, shall we? Who, like I said, have lived a very different life to what we're living as young people today. While some of them are out there on their cruises around the Caribbean, we're scrambling trying to get ourselves on the housing ladder. And if I have to hear from another OAP that I need to just work harder, I am just going to lose it, because that's what they say every time. If you jump on Twitter, they are constantly saying, oh, well, if you work hard, you'll be able to get onto the property ladder. If you work hard, you'll be able to afford your fuel. Like, no, that's not how it works. Because if you genuinely believe that pressures facing young people today, the inability to afford housing, the stagnation of wages, the rising cost of living, deindustrialisation, by the way, since Thatcher, are being driven by £2.1 billion in asylum spending rather than by structural issues in the economy, then you're not analysing the system at all. You are a fool, a mug being directed away from it. And sorry, but young people want to actually afford rent. Like, is that some crazy thing to think about? People shouldn't have to have two fucking jobs to survive. I'm not trying to do whataboutisms, but I think we need a serious analysis, and we need to be asking questions like, why has housing become so unaffordable? We should be asking why rent consumes such a large proportion of our income. How many of us have to spend so much of our income every single month on rent? It would ask why wages have failed to keep pace with inflation for years, and it would ask why wealth has become increasingly concentrated at the top, whilst public services are being stretched in the way that they are. But instead of those questions being asked, we're given a much simpler story, a story where the problem is not the system, where you've got people like Sophie telling us, young people, that we need to just, get over it and really look after our old people who have paid into the system. It's getting boring. But this is not a new strategy. This is the continuation of political strategy that successive governments have relied on. For decades, we've seen governments that have allowed housing to become a vehicle for wealth accumulation rather than basic need, who have weakened labour protections, weakened unions, normalised insecure work. They've implemented austerity policies for years and years. And at every stage, rather than addressing those systemic issues, they've encouraged the public to focus on who is deserving and who is not. It's exactly why they keep talking about cutting things when it comes to benefits. And I'm sorry, the state pension basically does function like that. Do I want pensioners to have a safe life? Of course I do. Do I want them in warm homes? Of course I do. Who doesn't? But I also want young people to not have to fucking suffer the way that they do every single day. But again, I really need to preface, we have a very different economic reality in comparison to the oldies. One shaped by political decisions that have made stability a lot harder to achieve. We have lived very different lives. Mike, I could go on and on and on, but I actually want to get your thoughts on whether Farage is pandering to the oldies, to the pensioners. Do you think he's pandering? Does he actually care about the pensioners?
I mean, he has to pander, right? Because Farage's base is older, it's whiter, it's predominantly male. These tend to be people who are outside of major cities, living kind of post-industrial coastal towns. They're homeowners. The kind of coalition we saw kind of mobilised around Leave in 2016 is the same coalition that's being mobilised now. And I think when he speaks about triple lock, he isn't speaking about a kind of economic story here. It's partly an economic story, but I think it's also partly cultural. It's kind of binary he draws between the deserving and undeserving. The Genrick also drew on in his contribution. It's this idea that there are some people who are kind of like sponging off the state. There's illegal immigrants who are, coming to this country and receiving benefits, and we're paying for all of that stuff. And you guys, the deserving, aren't getting what you deserve from Britain and from kind of society. This is all about a cultural narrative that Farage wants to spread, this idea of the undeserving versus the deserving. It's a pretty dangerous binary. And I think, Farage has to pander to his group, right? This group is an important base for Farage. He's talking to his base, to his people, these older voters, who fundamentally really care about pensioners. Probably not. But Farage is a politician and knows these people are the people who like to vote for him. So I think it's really important to think about Farage and think about what he's trying to achieve. I think, Farage is not offering anything to people under 40. So you speak about you hear Genrick say, we care about young people, and he kind of opens it with this idea of like reform caring for young people. I want our viewers, our listeners, to tell me, what is the reform offering for young people? What is reform offering for young people who are under 40, right? We see housing is a real problem. We see kind of insecure employment's a problem. We see kind of childcare for young professionals a real problem. Education is a real... There are so many problems young people are facing up and down Britain, and are not at all reform not even attempting to address these issues being faced by young people. So reform's offering for me is quite shallow. It's this kind of cultural framing of the deserving versus the undeserving. And in Farage's eyes, the deserving are kind of like older white voters who are going to like to vote for reform. And maybe younger people, marginalised groups are the less deserving. This is the binary he's chosen to draw. And for me, I think this is a real cultural story that Farage is trying to tell. And the dangerous thing I think Farage does is he frames all of this through the lens of common sense. Of course, because you paid into the system, you deserve more than what you're getting. Of course, we shouldn't be funding these illegal migrants. It's this kind of common sense framing. He kind of distills these really complex situations into just like kind of really simple narratives, like these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, it's these people's fault, we're going to do more for you guys. That kind of common sense framing is really, really dangerous, because what it does is he shifts the kind of norms. Like you kind of present a new normative argument and present it in such simple terms. I think it's really, really dangerous, and I think it is really, really worrying that Reform are choosing to kind of pander in this way. And again, I'm totally with you, Sarah. I think pensioners and older people deserve to live a real quality life. Like I want us to be a nation and to be a people who care for the elderly. I think you learn a lot about a nation by how they care for the elderly. So I don't think any of us are sat here today and saying, Reform shouldn't, or no political party should have an offering for older people. Of course they should. The problem with Reform's offering is it's clearly a political decision to pander to older voters. It's clearly a political decision to think about triple locking these terms, and this kind of binary draw between the deserving and the undeserving all of this is entirely political, and it fits into the kind of broader narrative reform's been trying to create for years and years of illegal immigration being this huge problem, and these older voters, these kind of white, predominantly white older voters being let down by the state, being let down by the system. That's a really dangerous narrative to draw. And again, it's this kind of simple reform framing of common sense. It's all about the immigrants. We're going to help solve things. Actually, I don't think reform have a lot of answers to the problems we face as a nation. And that's going to be one of our problems, right? Because you need to govern for a nation. Reform couldn't just govern for people over 50. Right, you need at some point some kind of meat on the bones and a story you're going to tell to younger people. And so far, all we have from reform when it comes to young people is a really vague platitude about we're going to build homes and we're going to like economic growth, all very vague, right? So yeah, I think Reform and Farage are essentially pandering to their base, and it's all about this kind of cultural narrative of the deserving and the undeserving.
Yeah, you make a really great point, actually, because the question is not whether we should like pander to old people, and it's not whether we should cut support elsewhere. The question is why in one of, I think we're the sixth richest country when it comes to nominal GDP, like why in a country that it has so much wealth, that we're being told that there's not enough to ensure basic security for everyone without taking from someone else. And I think that's something that frustrates me. I love that you'd spoken about the deserving and undeserving binary, because that was going to be my follow-up question. But I do have another question for you, because the rhetoric that is coming out a lot at the moment, and I think that young people are facing, is you do have the weaponization of generational politics, this whole like, but if you just work harder, then you'll be able to have an easier life. And I do hear it from boomers. I do hear it from the older generations, but you know, like I had to graft to get to where I needed. Like you do hear them say that. So what would you say when people say, but it's always been tough? What are they doing to history? Are they flattening history? What's the risk in just reducing it simply to, but it's always been tough, so kind of get over it?
Yeah, I think that's just kind of classic. Just work hard. If you just work harder, you'll kind of overcome all of these problems. It's your fault. You're having too much avocado on toast. That kind of very simple, boring story. As someone who works with young people, obviously I lecture at university, I see how hard my students work. I see how dedicated they are to their studies and how anxious they get about jobs, about education, all kinds of things. The problem we have in Britain is we are offering nothing to young people, right? Services, you can say youth services have been cut. We're seeing schools crumble, and state schools across the country being completely underfunded and neglected. The teaching sector, which is what you know all about, Sarah. Think about the conditions teachers are having to kind of work through. That again is of course going to affect the education being given to young people, and later on in life it's going to have huge repercussions. So there are so many ways in which Britain is not functioning for young people, and simply saying we need to work harder and things have always been tough ignores the huge structural problems that continue to grow in Britain. Young people leave university with huge debts. It's now becoming more and more difficult to find a job. It's now becoming more and more difficult to get on the housing ladder unless you have help from your parents. And of course, that's not easy for all young people. Not every young person can turn to the bank of mum and dad and get some help with a deposit for a house. So what you're now seeing is just seeing adulthood extended into kind of adolescence rather, extended into your kind of mid-30s, where people are still living at home in their early to mid-30s because they can't afford to buy a property. Now that simply is not okay, and telling people just to work harder is not going to solve those problems. I think we need some kind of politicians who are able to diagnose the structural problems we face when it comes to inequality, when it comes to underinvestment, all these structural issues we face as a nation, diagnose those and actually try and think about something that we can do about them. Not just blaming immigrants, not just blaming those on benefits, not these kind of really simple narratives that some politicians try and carve. These are actually really deep structural problems that won't be solved by just working harder. So I find that narrative quite condescending. And again, I see young people on a daily basis working hard at university, committed to their studies, that guarantees them nothing. It guarantees them nothing because Britain around them is crumbling. I was speaking to one of my former students who's one of the hardest working students you ever would have met, got a first class honours, went to do a master's, got a distinction. She's struggling to find a job simply because there's just not that many jobs out there for young people. So these are not people who aren't working hard, who aren't committed, who don't love this country. These are people who do all the things you should do and have been let down by the state around them. And again, Reform haven't got a story, or certainly compelling or convincing story, to address any of the issues young people are facing beyond, hey, just work harder, buddy, and it'll be all okay for you.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And it's lazy. It's super lazy. And I think just to add on to that, I think the moment that people start falling for that lazy but intentional politics that Reform are doing, where they decide and people around them decide which group is more deserving of support, instead of questioning why so much wealth is concentrated in so few hands, or like you said, why these structural issues are so deep rooted in the fabrics of British society, then you're not challenging the system at all. I think you're a victim in maintaining it. But yeah, really great point, Mike. Let's go on to our second story, which is all about Farage sacking the housing chief. So Nigel Farage has sacked Reform UK's housing chief Simon Dudley after Dudley suggested that post-Grenfell fire safety regulations had gone too far and were placing excessive burdens on development. Simon Dudley, the former chair of Homes England and Reform's new housing and infrastructure spokesperson, said that Britain's house building sector was stifled by quote-unquote over-regulation in the wake of the Grenfell Tower fire, which killed 72 people and displaced dozens of others in 2017. In an interview with Inside Housing shared with the iPaper, he said this: extracting Grenfell from the statistics, actually, people dying in house fires is rare. Many, many more people die on the roads driving cars, but we're not making cars illegal, so why are we stopping houses being built? He added, people may feel that we've done the right thing through introducing this regulation, but on the other side of that, think about all the human suffering of not having a home, not being able to have children and being stuck in your parents' home, in your childhood bedroom. So there is a balance. You know, sadly, everyone dies in the end. It's just how you go, right? You can't stop tragic things from happening. He added, fires do happen. Grenfell was a reaction to a tragedy, but the impact that it has had is to stop house building of any tall buildings generally in London and the whole of the country. Do we need to unpack that, or can we just simply summarise that as utterly disgraceful? Like, that was abhorrent to even read. Kimia Zabihayan, I hope I haven't butchered her name, advocate for Grenfell next of kin, a large group of immediate families of those who lost their lives in the fire, said Dudley's comments revealed a quote-unquote moral vacuum and suggested that framing housing as a choice between building homes and safely creating at preventable deaths. So, in response to all of this, Farage sacks him. A Reform spokesperson stated, homes must, of course, be built safely. However, overly burdensome building safety regulations can stifle house building, meaning targets are missed and the waiting list for homes grows longer at a time when we need more. Simon's comments on Grenfell reflected his broader point that the regulatory pendulum has swung too far in response to the tragedy. As he explained, there is a fine balance between over-regulation, which can slow the delivery of new homes, and ensuring that more homes are built safely without too much red tape. This is why Reform is an utterly bullshit party, and Nigel Farage is full of shit. Because isn't this also revealing? Because what you're hearing there is not a rejection. I personally don't see it as a rejection of Dudley's argument. It's a refinement of it. It's the same idea, just phrased a little bit more carefully, talking about this idea of red tape, talking about why regulation and all these measures kind of are a little bit of a nuisance to them. They're still describing safety regulations introduced after the Grenfell Tower fire, which is an awful tragedy, as overly burdensome. They're still arguing that regulation is something that gets in the way of house building, and they're still presenting this as a trade-off between safety and supply. That framing relies on a very specific assumption, which is that the housing crisis is being driven by too much regulation rather than by the structure of the housing market itself. You guys don't need me to go on and on about abolishing landlords, because I can fucking do that for ages. But it ignores the fact that developers often sit on land without actually building on it to maximise their profit, and it ignores the role of speculation and investment in driving up those prices. It ignores the reality of housing being used as this asset making scheme that's been turned into an asset class where profit takes priority over the need of those that actually do need shelter. And instead of confronting any of that, instead of confronting landlordism and the fact that people have multiple homes, it offers a much simpler explanation, which is that safety rules are getting in the way. We already know where that logic leads. The Grenfell Tower fire was not caused by failures in safety, failures in oversight, and was not caused by an excessive regulation. It was caused by failures in safety, failures in oversight, and a system in which cost-cutting decisions were allowed to take precedence over human life. And lest we forget that most of the people in that tower were working-class individuals that came from different walks of life. So when a political party responds to that disaster by saying that the regulatory pendulum has swung too far, what they're really saying is that the response to a catastrophe that killed over 70 people has now become inconvenient. And I think that that's where you need to kind of understand that Farage isn't challenging things simply by sacking this guy, because I don't think that he's said much in response. People fucking died. Grenfell was not just a fire. This is what happens when working class lives are treated as expendable in a system that prioritises cost over safety. Mike, is this Farage's careful management of optics simply by sacking Simon?
It absolutely is. And I think Reform have a huge problem when it comes to those candidates and people attached to the party saying absolutely bonkers things. Like, this is not the first time it's happened. And I can guarantee you now, I'm saying this to our listeners and viewers now, it wouldn't be the last time. Like, just literally, remember the 2024 general election. We had multiple candidates who got off the same, basically, like, racist, Islamophobic stuff. We saw very recently, actually, a Reform councillor, Lynn Dean, was suspended for saying racist things on social media. So, like, Reform candidates or people attached to the party always say and do things that are hostile to marginalised groups. Now, I wonder why that's the case. Sarah. It's because this entire political project is built on hate and division, right? And that's why it attracts people who say things that are flippant about those who've passed away in the tragedy. It's flippant towards migrants and it's hostile towards migrants and racialized groups and Muslims, etc. The entire point of the Reform project is to be hostile, and I think Farage often tries to distance himself from these kind of ideas by saying, we got rid of these people now, we sacked them, etc. But we have to ask ourselves, why did Reform attract people who say horrible things about those who passed away in the Grenfell Tower fire? Why is it Reform attract candidates who constantly say racist things? Why is it Reform have candidates who always say things that are Islamophobic? Like, what is going on there? I think it's actually a Reform problem. And Reform topped the polls, right? So Reform was polling between 24 and 27% in the polls, right? They've been topping the polls for quite some time. The problem is people kind of look at that and say, Reform are going to win the next election, blah, blah, blah. The key thing with winning an election is you have to field candidates across those 650 seats. And fundamentally, I don't know if Reform can field candidates across those 650 seats who haven't said something deeply racist or problematic at some point that will come and backfire in Reform's face. It's a huge, huge problem. Thinking about the comments kind of made here by this person in question, it's just quite clearly wrong. And again, it speaks to Reform's inability to actually deal with the matters at hand. So, like, a lot of the post-Grenfell fire safety regulations that have come in aren't about making house building more difficult. They actually essentially apply to higher risk residential buildings, and they have made it safer. So the idea that this is the reason why house buildings become more difficult, it's just a false narrative. And again, it's about trying to point the finger in the wrong direction. We need to be clear about what Grenfell was, what happened. It was permitted because the regulatory environments prioritized kind of cost over human life. Corners were cut, warnings were ignored, and 72 people who largely came from migrant and working class backgrounds were let down. They paid for the kind of regulatory environment, which was far too loose. They paid for that with their lives. That's what happened with Grenfell. And the measures that have been implemented since then are simply trying to ensure that never happens again. And no modern democracy like ours should see people burn to death in their homes the way we saw at Grenfell. So again, I'm really concerned about reforms kind of like really their oversimplification of things. I'm concerned they have people who constantly say crazy things, and Farage seems to think the only way we can the only way we can solve this is by can just getting rid of them. Oh, we'll just get rid of them. It's fine. No, he said that crazy thing. It's fine. It's done now. No, 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 no. Think about it. Why is reform attracting people who say these things? It's because it's all parts of the project.
Really great point. I completely agree with you. And I think I remember reading an article back in 2019, and this has probably changed now. It's probably gone up quite significantly, but it was something along the lines of for every teacher, there's like 4 landlords or something like that. I think there's just 4 times as many landlords as there are teachers. And I am of the belief, and maybe you can push back on this if you want, Mike, but I think there is a simpler solution to solving the housing crisis, or what a simple solution to solving the housing crisis. And it is seeing the end of private ownership and landlordism. I do genuinely think that is what is holding us back. And I think one of the things that is one of the most staggering things at the moment is how housing has become this asset class. So I personally think that we don't need, because they use this lazy rhetoric, and every single time a politician says we need to build more houses, I'm like, no. It's not about building more houses. I don't think we need some like ecologically unforgivable projects where we're building on green spaces, although I welcome that too. I don't mind building more homes, 100%. But the issue with building homes on land that's private, on land that's owned by these super rich fucking people, I think is the issue. I think we need to learn the wisdom of the last century, and that's to acknowledge that what's holding us back is landlordism, and that's the enemy of affordability at the moment, and the enemy of creating these, unfortunately, these homes that structurally are not great to even live in the first place. How many new builds are people living in at the moment, and they're saying that there are so many issues? And I'll never forget Awab Ishaq, I think that's what his name was, a 2-year-old boy whose parents had complained again and again and again about the mold and the damp that was in their council home or social housing. I can't remember what it was. And he ended up dying, and they had to bring a law into place to say, well, yeah, the way that these homes are being looked after by these private hands is unforgiving. So what are your thoughts on that? Because they're saying, well, we need to just build more homes, and what's stopping us from building more homes is all of this red tape. But is it even simpler than that? Is it simply actually like landlord abolition? I don't know. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I definitely think landlordism is a huge problem. The idea that people can just hoard 20, 30, 40 homes and rent them out and to kind of profit from them is fundamentally wrong. You know, housing to me is a right, and it's not something that people can just hoard for their own benefit. That's a huge problem. And the way the housing market works is it works to serve those people. You have very little kind of protections for renters. Renters are at the mercy of their landlord often, and their rents could be hiked up. I'm standing to be a Green Councillor in Tooting Broadway, and one of the things I'm seeing in Tooting Broadway is the idea that people's young professionals are seeing their rents just hiked up by their landlords. And we know that housing and renting is one of the biggest expenses people have. So when it comes to cost of living, if your rents are super high and are at a ridiculous rate, then of course it's going to affect you long term. Of course it's going to cause problems long term. So I definitely agree with you, Sarah, that that's something we need to regulate much better. You know, public ownership of housing is really, really important for me, I think. And this question of building homes, I see homes being built in London all the time. You know, just eyeballing it, right? There's always some kind of new development somewhere in London. Whenever I'm visiting friends in different parts of London, there's always some kind of new build that's been built in the last 3-4 years. One of the problems we have isn't that homes aren't being built, it's that affordable homes aren't being built. So what kind of homes are being built is a question I always ask myself. And I think we're building homes that aren't affordable to the average person. They end up in the hands of people who leave them empty or buy them to rent them out again. That's obviously a huge problem. So those are the kinds of things that any serious party will be looking to address. But again, we have reform, we have, you know, Dudley making comments about things that aren't actually a problem at all. And in many ways, the regulation that we saw brought in after Grenfell was to prevent tragedies from happening. So we need to think about the real problems, even beyond the number of homes being built. Sarah, you made a really important point about the conditions of homes. And, social housing is something that I feel really passionately about, I feel really strongly about. As well as not building enough affordable homes, we don't even look after the homes that we have, the kind of social housing stock we have available to us. I'm sure some of our listeners and watchers will know Quadro Housing, who does loads of stuff around the conditions of homes. It can't be right that we're seeing kids grow up in homes where there's loads of mold and damp, things are falling apart. That's no way to live. It can't be right that we're seeing, overcrowding in some homes. These are some huge, huge issues. How do we treat people in social housing? How much social housing are we actually trying to build? Again, this conversation about building affordable housing. How much social housing are we trying to build in different councils and different boroughs in London that we can help house people who are on long waiting lists? These are the big issues I think about when it comes to housing, not this kind of red tape that's been referred to by Dudley or by other people in reform. Those are the big issues. Landlordism is a huge issue. Social housing stock's a huge issue. Building affordable homes. These are all the big issues. And I think, again, the longer we simplify these stories into, kind of pointing the thing in the wrong direction, the further we get from a solution. And the problem is, this is a problem that isn't just going to stand still. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. Rents are going to continue to rise. I'm also hugely in favour of rent caps. I think rent caps are really, really important. The idea that you're at the mercy of your landlord can just raise your rents to rates that are ridiculous. That can't be right. That can't be that's no reasonable way to govern. So yeah, I think there are so many things that I think about when it comes to housing, and the things that have been referred to when it comes to Dudley and his comments just really don't stack up to what I'm seeing around me in terms of the big problems.
Really, really well said. No, completely agree with you. And I think that's probably a great opportunity for me to talk to you about the fact that it's 2026 and we really want this year to be big for Turn Left. As you guys know, we're always grateful for your support, for your comments, for your Discord chats, which I'm a little bit more active in now. I think we want to be more ambitious than last year and to really put ourselves on the map. We'd want this year to be the year where we can have our own studio, and we're doing some amazing work that Curtis told you about, where we're traveling up into Leeds to actually kind of be in this makeshift studio that Curtis has put together, which is really exciting. But we want to be able to have our own space, and also for our contributors to be paid for the work that we do, because we do all of this alongside our full-time jobs. But we recognise your support over the years has been amazing. We're ready to take this to the next level. So we rely on small donations. So if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. You can also, as you know, become a YouTube member for just 99p. So on to our last story, and it literally makes me... sorry, someone mentioned the Wordle. That's a violation. But this one pains me to talk about because I really, really cannot stand this guy. But Rupert Lowe, we're on to Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe, the MP for Great Yarmouth and former Reform UK figure, now leader of Restore Britain, is claiming over 120,000 members, many of them young people, frustrated with rising house prices, high taxes, stagnant wages, and a general sense that the system is no longer working for them, saying that the polls have gone up to 7%. And the polls do show that. I've really got to be honest, am I concerned about it? No. Do I need to be? At this point, I'm unsure. I'm not quite sure, but there does seem to be this growing-ish, not one that's threatening popularity with Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe, in classic Rupert Lowe fashion, puts out a monologue, a mammoth of a tweet, because that's all he does. And unfortunately for you, I'm going to read some of it, not all of it. He says, "I'm with the young British men and women who feel crushed under inflated house prices, stagnating wages, record tax burden, and just generally a really piss poor standard of living that is falling embarrassingly far behind countries we once competed with. My question to them is, is the status quo what you want? Because if it is, there are a variety of parties to vote for. If you want something radically different, and I mean radically, then Restore Britain is giving you that option. Ask yourself, does the current model work for you? Restore Britain doesn't want to reform the establishment. We want to smash this up. Do you? If you want more of the same, vote for it. Tories, Reform, Labour, Lib Dem, go for it. Your choice, same faces, same model, same decay. The Greens want to accelerate our transformation into a third world dump. If that's what you want for Britain, Polanski is your man. Certainly don't vote for Restore Britain. We want a fundamentally different economic model, one that gives young British men and women in the freedom to pursue their own goals, whether that's building their family, business, or own financial freedom. That's what we're about. We're going to be honest, and we're going to take the difficult decisions required to benefit us all. That very much includes the young Brits who, for their entire lives, have been ripped off by a decadent political establishment that cares about votes and only votes. Restore Britain will treat you all with the respect and honesty you deserve. There is a political party that's finally your side. Restore Britain is on your side. Oh, blah blah blah. AI. It's like he does everything apart from put a policy agenda together. Like, when are they going to do that? Man of the people, apparently. Listen, if you want to aim low, just vote low. The saddest part is that young people are lapping it up. Just go on Twitter and you'll find like a plethora of young people who are obviously angry, rightfully so, at what's happening in Britain, but are also backing the likes of Lowe, who are parroting this bullshit at them on Twitter. Because if you are genuinely asking why young people cannot afford housing, you have to look at the financialisation of the housing market, and we could, genuinely, all roads lead back to Thatcher. Like, just look at Thatcher. We can't have a conversation about housing without talking about Thatcher. The role of landlords, I was speaking about earlier, the way properties become an investment vehicle rather than a basic need, this thing that's become part of the asset class, and at decades of at decades of policy decisions that have prioritised asset growth over accessibility. Can also talk about stagnant wages, looking at labour markets, declining bargaining power, insecure work, and the broader distribution of wealth in the economy. But none of those explanations are being centred here. We're not talking about structural issues, because we know what Lowe does. He frames his arguments around migration and who's British and who isn't, and England for the English, and blah blah blah. So always towards migration and towards culture and towards the idea that the system would function properly if only certain groups were removed or restricted. And that isn't a new political strategy. We've seen this time and time again throughout the decades. It's very well established. He's talking about smashing the establishment, but I think he's certainly part of the establishment, and you guys are very much aware of that too. It's far easier to tell people that their problems are caused by those with less power than it is to challenge those who hold the most power. I was having a conversation, sorry, such a digression, with someone recently who said, but I'm going to vote Rupert Lowe because, not me, by the way, but I'm going to vote Rupert Lowe because Rupert Lowe gives his MP salary to charity. That's not a policy or a political agenda. Like, that's just what he wants to do. I don't know. It's something to unpack. But I think what's really interesting is that, Nigel Farage has dismissed Restore Britain as temporary, which suggests that this is not just about ideology, but about competition over the same political base. And that base is being shaped by real economic pressure. People are fucking frustrated, of course. But instead of offering solutions that address the root causes of that pressure, what we're seeing is a competition over who can provide the most compelling narrative about who is to blame. Let me go to Mike. Mike, I know you probably, you've got quite a lot to say on this, but do you see this 7% for Restore as a genuine political shift amongst young people, or more of a reaction to economic pressure without a clear ideological direction? I can't hear Mike. Sorry. I can hear you now, sorry.
I don't suspect it will hold. I think the anger is completely real, right? Young people in this country are dealing with housing they can't afford. There's wages are not keeping pace with the cost of living. This is a really brutal environment for people who are under the age of 40. So I do think that anger is legitimate, and obviously we've spoken about it previously on this show. It should be taken very, very seriously. Like, there should be a political agenda by all parties to speak to those people under the age of 40 who are struggling to buy homes, etc. That's fundamentally real. But when you read Rupert Lowe's tweet, and he loves a long tweet, by the way. Have you seen? Don't know if people have seen that meme of, like, I'm not reading all of that, but I'm happy for you that it happened, or sad, or whatever. Like, that's exactly how I feel whenever I see one of his long tweets. I'm like, bro, I'm not reading that. Someone to summarize it for me. I can't be doing with Rupert Lowe, honestly. I just cannot be doing with Rupert Lowe. But, like, his long tweets are really, like, there's loads of vibes, and there's not really, like, any policy solutions. It's just like it's all about immigration. It's generally just like, and it's the migrants' fault. It's just literally how every Rupert Lowe tweet seems to end. Like him talking about smashing it up. It's not really a policy agenda. It's like it's a slogan. It's just saying things. You know, the idea that London resembles, third world. It's going to resemble a third world country. All of it's just this kind of like real racial grievance. That he thinks speaks to young people. And I think most young people don't think the problems they face are because of immigration or because of growing diversity, all of these things. Young people know that the issues they face are far more complicated and far more structural than just simply immigration, right? So I think this is a classic thing that those on the right are doing. And I include the Conservatives as well, right? The Conservatives also, for years and years, have weaponized immigration as a problem, and weaponized immigration as the real problem that people face. But as we mentioned earlier, Sarah, they say nothing about landlordism. They say nothing about stagnant wages. They say nothing about the decline of trade unions and the rising insecure work. They say nothing about those things. There's nothing about raising the wealth, raising kind of wealth taxes, all these things that could actually structurally make the country much better. Instead, a lot of these political agendas these people represent on the right is about protecting capital at the expense of labour and demonising migrants. And this is fundamentally just will not win. This will not be successful long term. This will not help things get better for young people. And I think a lot of it is just really, really empty. And it is interesting that Rupert has kind of emerged as a threat for reform. And I wonder how long term Farage does deal with that in terms of like potentially eating into some reform space. That might actually be good for those of us who maybe fear reform kind of general election win. If Restore Britain going to eat into some of their votes, potentially that might be a good thing. But fundamentally, I think Reform and Restore share a lot of things in common. He speaks so fluently about these issues of migration and the asylum system and the way in which Britain's a third world dump and all these kinds of things. But when you actually really dig deep and really think about, okay, what are the solutions being offered by Lowe, by Reform, by these different parties on the right? They're very empty. Again, it's very high on vibes. It's very like, loads of long paragraphs on Twitter, loads of kind of empty speeches. And when it comes to actual deep solutions or kind of even convincing solutions, none of it's there. It's just very, very empty, a lot of bluster, a lot of noise about migration with no solutions to help us.
Really well said. And Rupert Lowe's bloody loser. Like, you're actually so right. You're so right. Whenever he writes these long tweets, like, it is just vibes. It's like, what can I do that's going to score some points? Because I saw there was a tweet that I put in this script, but then it got deleted and the account left, so obviously it might have been some sort of bot. But someone was like, well, I'm a young person and I'm going to vote for Restore, like, because they say all the right things on Twitter. And I'm like, exactly, it's on fucking Twitter. Like, it's this loser site that has all these bots that I think lacks credibility and substance now in a lot of ways, because people are just trying to grift from Twitter and say what's right at the time in relation to just societal woes. So I personally don't see Restore as a threat. Personally, I think they're just this party where those who are radically right who feel that reform aren't right enough for them will go even further right, because Restore do a really good job of blaming explicitly black and brown people for Britain's problems. And I think whenever I've done a Restore story, there's always been the most horrendous comments from Restore supporters, essentially pointing to who I am as an individual, which is a black woman who it takes from British society. So that tends to be the rhetoric, the avenue that they go down. So I see them as a baseless, substanceless party that just want to grift. Yeah, they this whole, like you said, smashing the establishment is actually just BS, to be honest.
I completely agree with you, Sarah. I think what Restore do, maybe in a more pointed way than Reform, is really speak to young men and. Yes. It's very like, the sort of guy you would have seen on the Manosphere who might be kind of like listening to his Toki and Andrew Tate.
HS Tiki Toki.
Yeah. Toki, sorry, I'm miles off it there. But that kind of person, right? I think they're trying to speak to those people, those kind of audiences. And again, I don't think he has any solutions for these people. I think he's pandering to a very reactionary masculinity. And there is a big ecosystem of these kind of people, right? These kind of people who feel they understand young men's sense of economic frustration and have the solutions for them, and actually they don't. Andrew Tate hasn't got a solution for young men, nor is his Toki or whatever his name is, and nor does Rupert Lowe. These three people and beyond, right? This whole manosphere environment, which I think also incorporates some politicians who pander to this kind of anger that young men might be feeling. I really want young men to understand that these men do not have the solutions to the problems you face. They're not going to help things become cheaper or better. They're not going to help you find a home. They're not going to help you have a stronger sense of belonging in society. They're going to make you even more angry. They're going to, they're going to pin the blame on the people who aren't to blame, and we're going to be further and further away from the solutions that we actually need. So I think it's compelling to young people because it's a very emotional story, right? It's kind of like good versus evil, which is always like a convincing story. Like, we're the good guys, you young working hard men. These are the bad guys, these migrants who are coming here, taking your jobs, and I'm going to do something about it. That can be a very compelling and simple story. But as we know, the reality is far more complex than this kind of good versus bad. It's a lot more grey. There's a lot more structural issues at play. There's a lot more hard work. Than just like blaming migrants. The solutions we need are, far more than just blaming migrants. So yeah, I think it's a far more pointed strategy than what, Reform are doing. Reform definitely lean on anger. But I think there's something like Restore leaning on kind of like the anger of men, and it speaks to kind of manosphere and the sort of stuff that Louis Theroux kind of uncovered in his documentary on Netflix.
Really fucking great point. I completely agree with you. And I think I could actually talk about that quite a lot, but I think we'll go to the comments, and I think we'll probably unpack that. Some of the comments probably says, hello, Curtis, if you'd like to join us. Is Curtis there? There he is.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Sorry. Bit slow off the mark. Superb show. Both of you.
Sorry, that's a really great point from Mike, because you do just get these disgruntled young men who are just so angry with life. And like, I do think anger is important to have. I do. But then when someone's really trying to weaponize that amongst young boys, amongst young men, and then have that be the vehicle that drives, point scoring in politics, it's such a sad reality. That was a really great point. I liked that. Sorry, Curtis.
I mean, like, but both your analysis has been absolutely fire tonight. I mean, I dropped you a message in WhatsApp saying, "Everything's been on fire." Yes, and we are going to come to your analysis and obviously the comments. But I'm going to start off, of course, with the super chats. Michael, hello, Michael, coming back in with a turn of membership. Thank you.
Thanks,
so
Michael.
Much. Specs, good to see you again with 5 turn left memberships.
Thanks, Specs.
Much appreciated. Kai Jr. 97. I don't think I've seen you before.
No.
And that's another 5 turn left memberships. Thank you so much. Not really. Rachel Atwood says, Ghoul sounds like Joni Ernest regarding Medicaid cuts. What story was this in reference to? I'm not quite sure, actually.
I'm not sure.
I'm so sorry. I feel like a lot of your comments you drop were like, oh, what are you referring to? That's our fault, not yours.
Yeah.
Keep bringing your comments in. Katie Marshall says, build more council housing. That will help. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all the super chats, and then we'll go back to some of the comments about the particular stories. Not really Rachel Atwood. Sorry. Again, not really Rachel Atwood says, regarding landlords, Jello Biafra, I think that's how you pronounce their name, had the right idea. Lead singer of Dead Monkeys? Is it not Dead Monkeys? Let me quickly Google, because I just Googled this because I know nothing.
I don't know who Jello
Dead
is. Kennedys.
And they had a song called Lynch the Landlord, so I think we know where Rachel's coming from. Jim Speaks, 10 turn left memberships. What a
Thanks,
legend.
Jim.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But if that wasn't enough, there's another 5. So
thank you, Jim.
A hero. He's still number 1 on the suspected list of who's Len McBain.
Yeah, Len McBain. Have you seen Curtis Daly's pen as well?
Yeah, Curtis Daly's pen. Someone made an entire YouTube account after my pen. This is some of the audience we get, Mike. By the way, really, we're a bunch of weirdos, aren't we?
I love it.
Deus Ex with 5 Turn Left memberships. Very generous audience tonight.
Very. Thank you.
Subsystems Vids with 10 Turn Left memberships. Wow.
Thank you.
And Antifa Vegan Boy, another 10 Turn Left
Thank you.
memberships.
It's really kind.
Hiril93 just became a member. Welcome to Turn Left. The World's End with a $4.99 super chat. Keep up the great work. I'm just going to quickly go through. There's not any more because I don't want to miss anyone. Okay. Let's get to our comments. Have to start off with David isn't anything. Excellent, Mike Bankole. We've had love from you. And speak of the devil, Curtis Daly's pen. Massive Mike Bankole fan.
That's
Looking forward to
great.
this one. Of course, Mike. We've seen you. You've been doing some fantastic work. So of course our audience is going to love you.
Of course they are.
No, very kind. Thank you very much, guys. Would love to come back on.
Yay.
Oh, that is 100% happening. Katie Marshall. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, we
thanks,
said gorgeous
guys.
looking Sarah, but we've had again Deus Ex says the hair is on point. So we had a lot of people saying they're loving your
thanks,
hair
guys. Thank you. Thanks.
tonight.
I'm gonna get awkward
so,
now.
So the first story, of course, reform in terms of protecting the triple lock. Jamie Ellis says pensions are benefits. We do hear a lot, particularly in the media, which is that pensions are somewhat different to universal credit disability benefits. But pensions are benefits. The biggest expenditure on benefits is pensions, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of what I was saying, like in the first story, that it's like this collective thing, that it's not this individualized pot with your name on, like it is this collective thing that everyone kind of just contributes to. So we kind of need to step away from this narrative that you have this pot of money with your name on it when you reach retirement age that is dedicated only to you because of what you've done in this in working life. But it is true, the biggest expenditure when it comes to benefits is pensions. But I think, again, what I'm seeing coming out in these stories is that people are still rooted in this this sense of individualism, like that we aren't working as a collective, or that we should not be working as a collective, when actually we are to be doing the latter. We should be working together to ensure that young people, when they do become old, that they are protected, that old people are not living in cold homes, and that old people are not struggling with where their food is coming next. Like, we need to be able to ensure that old people, pensioners, are actually living lives with real dignity towards the end of their their careers, or just towards the when they're a little bit older. But yeah, I think that's a great point, Jamie. Did you want to say anything, Mike?
No, I agree with you completely. We made a point earlier.
Yeah.
This is not. I don't want it to be seen as though we're doing divide and conquer. Like, so we're playing old people. I want there to be a narrative and a world where young older people live in dignity and age gracefully, and the state, are providing support for elderly people. My issue is that I think a lot of what reform do is pitting groups against each other, and again making political decisions of pandering to one base at the expense of another, and that is the problem.
Agreed.
I think that what you just said, Mike, nicely brings up this onto this comment. QVC Owl. Let's not assume that all pensioners are rolling in cash. There are many poor pensioners, dumb, reductionist, lazy politics. Also, Twitter ain't real life. And before we go to KBC said some nice comments about us too. Does like our work.
QVC.
QVC.
The shopping
Like
channel.
the shopping channel.
Yeah.
But look, we anticipated we were going to get these kind of comments. Let's hear your response.
Are they saying that our analysis was dumb, reductionist, lazy politics? But can I unpack a few things actually in this comment? This idea that I need to just quickly gloss over this. Twitter isn't real life. I actually find that to be relatively lazy, with all due respect, QVC. Like, I know that you're supporting and you're wonderfully in the comments, so please keep. Amazing to have you. But I do these extensions of ourselves that people say aren't real life. TikTok's not real life. Twitter's not real life. Facebook's not real life. I'm like, no. They are real life because they are impacting real people and they are stoking real anger in individuals. Even if some accounts are bots, people still actually lap that up, and these bots do say real things that real people do say. So I think we need to venture away from the fact that these extensions of ourselves that we carry in every single place and corner of society and every corner room of our house is real. But we also understand that there are pensioners that are struggling. But again, I need us to step away from this idea that we are in competition with pensioners, or that pensioners are in competition with migrants, or that migrants are in competitions with people on universal credit, or people on PIP, or whatever. Like, we need to step away from that. Why is it that we are constantly making these competitive comparisons between those who are deserving and those who are undeserving? Like, that's his lazy reductionist politics that politicians have been doing for God knows how long. You've got the Labour Party lazily doing it. You've got the Tories that were lazily doing it for 14 years. And you've got Restore and Reform doing the exact same thing, and Lib Dems maybe to a certain point too, but who are they? So it's like, I think the lazy politics, I think, is coming from those who are trying to point score, and not so much the people trying to sift through their bullshit. But that's my take.
Yeah, again, Sarah, I haven't got much to add. Like, I don't think anyone's sat here saying all pensioners are rolling in the money. And I don't think at any stage I fundamentally think pensioners deserve the ability to live and age with dignity. And I think that's what we should be campaigning for, just not at the expense and not with the kind of framework of, and we're going to cut benefits and we're going to demonize these young. That framing of that kind of like, these people are the good guys, these people are the bad guys, these people are deserving, these people are the undeserving. That's where my issue is. I really hate that framing. I think that framing is so dangerous.
Agreed.
Well, I want to ask you, Mike. I mean, do you think those of us on the left who do engage in the kind of like, okay, for example, my view has changed on the triple lock. Before I was like, absolutely keep it. Now I don't support that. Do you think we're engaging in this kind of pitting generations against each other? Because I think someone else left a comment in the chat saying you kind of pitting generations, older people versus younger working people. I mean, to be fair, like that, I've seen that a lot. Is that a fair criticism of, like, for me, if I say I think we should get rid of the triple lock?
Yeah, look, the triple lock is another debate, but I do think that, like, those of us maybe on the left, because we do tend to be maybe generally younger. Look, everyone, we all at times as human beings can be very myopic, and we defend our own interests. Sometimes in antagonistic ways, which means we pit ourselves against other groups. I do think we need to be careful. I was at the protest last week, and one of the kind of key slogan of the protest was love, hope, and unity. And unity is key, because unity isn't just about those who are ethnically the same as us, etc., or those who are ethnically different from us. Rather, it's not just about, it's unity also across all lines for me. And that includes generational lines. And I actually do think one of the growing divides in this country isn't just kind of ethnic or kind of racial, which has been stoked by politicians. There's also a huge generational divide. So I actually think those of us on the left need to be very, very careful when we advocate for young people, when we advocate for kind of marginalised communities. We are doing so in a way that isn't hostile to, older generations. Because fundamentally, again, a marker of a good democracy is how it treats the young people who and how they age. And I think it's really, really important that we don't fall into the trap of, pitting groups against each other like the right do, and actually understand that, we want to live in a society, in a world where young and old can live high quality, good quality lives, because that's fundamentally what we deserve.
Yeah, so I'm going to want to highlight this comment from Les Watts, because I watched Navarra last night. It was Helena and Dahlia Gabriel. And
God, people are really coming for us today.
well, Helena, so my view is, I used to be, again, as I said, in favour of keeping the triple lock. Now I'm against it. I've changed my view. Dahlia Gabriel basically said, I don't want to get into any kind of discussion around taking away benefits. It's a fair point, right? And I think this is what comment alludes to. But the thing is, though, the reality is people 65 and over, or in the pension class, shall we say, benefited from an economy that, they still had their hardships, but they benefited from economy that kind of worked. Inequality was lower, wages were higher. They had stronger unions. They had cheap housing, for example, and a lot of pensioners today benefited off that system, and a lot of them now have joined the asset class through having cheap housing, and it's being rented back to us. So when we talk about a wealth tax, for example, of course we're targeting out the multimillionaires and billionaires, and broadly, yes, it is the 99% versus the 1%. But also, there are many pensioners who are not earning off of the work they done, but they're earning off of assets. And we need to change that kind of economy, because at the moment, people get ahead in life based on what they already own. And I think that is and again, it's not individual pensioners' fault. It is a economy based on leeching from society when you own an asset, and that's how you can basically fund your retirement. We need to fundamentally flip that on the head. So it's not about sort of pitting. I mean, it kind of is, but if we fundamentally believe that work should pay and people shouldn't be living off of wealth, then yes, we should be looking at like how much pensioners are getting. Now, a lot of people say, well, pensioners are poor. Well, first of all, yes, when it comes to liquidity and cash reserves, yes, but asset rich. And it might seem harsh, but for those who've got lots of assets who are struggling, you can just sell your house. You don't need to have a 5-6 bedroom house when you're a pensioner. You can just downsize. Now, of course, on the flip side, state pension is pretty poor, £12,000 a year. I think we should, and again, Helena said this, Aaron Bassani said this, we should tie the state pension to inflation. And what that would do, to wage inflation. And I actually think that'll create some kind of gender harmony, because now older people will be like, do you know what? I now have a stake in younger people getting paid more, or working age people getting paid more, because if we benefit, pensioners benefit. At the moment, we're deliberately being pitted against each other based on the system. So I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I agree with that. With the state of inflation increase pensions. I'm not against this, but I also like. I don't care if I'm unlikable today. It's fine, but I do think we have to look at what's happened across history. The nature of struggle has changed quite significantly, and I think if we just lazily say that yes, people have always struggled, which I'm not denying, by the way. I do think working classes have historically struggled in Britain 100%, but the nature of that struggle has changed quite significantly. Like in the past you might wait a long time, but I think there was still at least a sense that something would be coming, that something would be provided by the state. And I think now more than ever you are kind of just stuck in this limbo as to whether you'll be provided anything, and when you'll be provided that, I think is something that needs to be spoken about. But you are in far less of a chance of benefiting from the state now, because when we look at the 1970s, around a third of the population lived in council homes, but today that figure has more than halved, and you've got massive waiting lists that remain like fucking enormous, and homelessness having surged. Like things are shit. Things are really shit right now. So hardship has always existed, always, but I do think that we need to look at the nature of that hardship and how it's now become so. It's formed the fabrics of British society so much so that people are not fazed when they see a homeless person on the streets. Like it's so common now to see what we're seeing at the moment, and for people to be on waiting lists for as long as they are. That is not a normal reality that we've become so desensitized to. So yeah, but we also, like you said, I think you made a great point, Curtis. When we look back in the day, 60s, 70s, there was an era of mass public house building of the welfare state, in the 40s. And whilst it was imperfect, I'm not saying it was good, amazing and like tip top shape, it was still expanding. Like it wasn't being dismantled, but we're seeing a huge dismantlement of all of that. And I will say that since Thatcher with the Right to Buy scheme, like that was something that started to take quite a strong hold in Britain. And now we're still seeing the effects of Thatcherism, but so much so that, and I think Laura Munch points to this, that we are going into a really scary time when it comes to impoverishment. So I think, yeah, we need to stop being desensitized to this sort of shit. Like, and I did see the comment earlier about the fact that old people have had it tough, and I'm like, yeah, I fucking know. But look at the times now. Old people have it tough, young people have it tough, working classes have it tough. Look at all of these intersections when it comes to people. Age at this point does not matter, because if you are in this demographic of working class people and add on to that you are disabled, or add on to that you're a black or brown or someone with an insecure status in this country, you are doubly fucked in this country. So I don't know, my take, but not everyone's going to agree.
I mean, much love to Les Watts, by the way. I think it's absolutely great that people will disagree with us. We often don't want everyone to just be singing from the same hymn sheet. So, like, if you feel like we're just talking shit, absolutely go ahead and say it. I mean, Les has been a viewer for us. So, yeah, much love to everyone. Let's go to our next comment. To be fair, but we will finish up the housing stuff in a second. We do have, because Sarah, you're saying, oh, everyone hates us today. I mean, look, we've got some defenders. I mean, Edward Sexby, again, regular viewer, says it's not a generational war. That's what they're doing. They're critiquing capitalism, the way the housing has developed since Thatcher setting off of social housing, labour relations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. The biggest crisis is the lack of council houses. Jim Speak says, if you ate fewer avocados, you'd have to run fewer charity marathons. Just lazy. So,
yeah, that's true. Oh, that is funny.
So, second story in regards to Grenfell. Horrific comments, by the way. There's this idea that we're not building enough housing and red tape is stopping that. That's the classic right-wing argument. You know, red tape is stifling business or whatever. But of course, that's not the case. Michael says we already have a lot of badly built property, so more regulation is required. I mean, I don't know if you've seen those videos over on Instagram and TikTok where, like, current house builders are like, there's such shoddy work these days compared to, like, 60s kind of housing in the 60s, 50s and 60s, which were like, or even earlier 40s, were like really robust. And now a lot of companies cut corners. So the idea that actually there's too much regulation, I think is rubbish. Mike, is it a lie that red tape is stopping house building?
Yeah, completely a lie. Again, when you think about the post-Grenfell stuff, a lot of that was to ensure that these kind of high-risk residential buildings were looked after in a much better way. Like, the story of Grenfell is that these people were ignored, and they paid the price of their lives. Like, that's the story. And the regulation brought in after that was to prevent a disaster of that nature happening again. I think we haven't prioritised, when it comes to house building, the right things. We haven't prioritised social housing, which I think would really... I saw a comment, actually, which I really agreed with, and it's the commenter, I can't remember if it's he or she, I have to go back and check, but I think in the comment they mentioned that it would also, if you had more social housing, would reduce the ability of private landlords to control the market in the way they do. And I think, you know, Sarah really mentioned that in her passionate contribution earlier. I think the kind of landlordism that exists and the fact that there's so many people at the mercy of their landlords when it comes to rent is a huge problem. So, you know, I think we often... I really, really hate hearing politicians say we need to build more homes, because I think it's just a truism at this point. Like, of course we need to build more homes, but no one ever tells us what kind of homes we need to build. And I'm just fed up of hearing that kind of vague term just thrown around. It's been thrown around for decades and decades now. We need to build more homes. But yeah, I look at, you know, the areas I'm in, kind of Southwest London, I'm seeing homes being built all the time. They're not affordable homes. So yeah, I think it's a complicated thing, the kind of housing crisis, but I think there are some quite easy solutions that would make things a million times better very, very quickly.
Agreed.
I love that comment what you just said, which is that, oh yeah, build more housing. Yeah, obviously, it's like politicians saying things need to be better. Okay,
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't say much, does it? But also, I kind of want to slightly tackle the whole, oh, it's because we're not building enough houses. Of course, I'm not against more house building. But in 2019, we actually had a record, or there was a record of house building. Essentially, we had more homes or houses than ever before, and yet we still had a housing crisis, because ultimately, it's not about how many houses, it's the fact that most of the houses that are being built are private sector, are housing associations that often don't get to poorer communities where they need to go, and it's just basically housing that is going into the rental market. So it's not even about the amount of houses, which smashes the argument that, because, we have a housing crisis because there's too many immigrants, which Rupert Lowe likes to say. It's not that. The number one commercial business in this country is landlordism. That's crazy. Yep. You would think that actually, if we're an entrepreneurial country, and we're like inventing things, then is it not a service or a product that is the most common type of business. No, the most common type of business is one based on quite literally leeching from society. So when you have that, it then kind of throws up the myth that it was simply about building more houses. If we build more houses, then there will be no housing crisis. It's rubbish. The problem is housing isn't going to people. Right? We have empty homes whilst foreign oligarchs own houses. What we need is council houses. And yes, I'm with you, Sarah. As people know, we need to absolutely abolish landlordism or private landlordism. No one should be able to own a home as an asset to sell it on or to rent out. The only landlordism I want to see is through the state, and you pay at cost price. Rent is tied to how much it actually costs to run it. Maybe a bit extra because that money could go into the NHS or whatever, but not to pay for someone else's mortgage. That to me is how you could fix the housing crisis. Because at the moment, from Thatcher, downstream from Thatcher, she created a division within the working class. Part of the working class became middle class because they managed to get a cheap house and then rented it out, whilst the rest of the working class became the renters. And that's how we have, ultimately, an age division. Like, this country isn't divided on class. It's actually divided on age. And I personally think, there's probably other factors, I personally think that real big division was because under Thatcher, some people were elevated under Thatcher from the working class, which is why you get lots of working class people who love Thatcher and the Tories. And then there were the rest of the working class that stuck with the left or Labour because they weren't elevated. And the people that were elevated within the working class are the pensioners today. And they, you know... I do want to quick... did you want to highlight this comment? Because I did want to...
I'm so glad you got that up. I'm not even gonna pack it. I can't be bothered. Can you do it?
This person said that telling my Irish grandfather listening to posh Southern people saying he didn't do enough. No one here said older people haven't done enough. No particular individual was at fault. It's the systems. That's true. Secondly, people need to understand Southern accent doesn't always mean posh.
It doesn't mean posh.
No, a guy one time, I say this a lot, one time I was on Novara Media and someone said, why has someone got a brown posh public school person on there? I want to quickly say, right, I never went to university. I got 4 GCSEs. I wasn't academic, and my accent is, let's be honest, we all code switch. I'm doing content online, so yes, I do sound a bit more well-spoken. In real life, I'm a bit more, or eat me lover. So I did want to quickly highlight that. Let's go back to
I just think that's such. It's so reductive because we've consistently pointed to the structural issues that have enabled impoverishment and extreme poverty in this country and the unaffordability of homes. No one is saying that pensioners have not put in a hard graft. No one is saying that. But what I find really, really lazy is people presuming that we're posh because of where we're located in the country. We just have a very standard accent. But if people want to know about struggle, like, I can absolutely talk to you about it, but I'm not going to bore you with it. It's fucking tiring. I need to prove that I'm part of the working class. You do you, darling.
Yeah, I am working class. I'm currently have no assets in my name. I'm renting, and most time I spend worrying whether I'm going to be kicked out or not. So that's
literally it. Like, it makes no sense. Like, if you want to know about precarity when it comes to housing, like, literally, I'll talk to you about my life. I might do just a little video on that, but I don't need to prove that we've struggled. Fuck that.
Mike, I want to ask you, do you find that a lot where people do high class accent? Like, don't get me wrong, you can hear someone who's obviously really, really posh. But do you ever hear that was like, oh, you must be extremely wealthy or posh or middle class because your accents... I mean, you have a very well-spoken accent too.
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, the way you sound and the way you speak. All of a sudden people, think you can't relate maybe, but I hope that... I think it's far more important for people by the substance of what they say. So if I was sitting here and not defending the rights of the marginalised and the rights of communities who've been trampled on, then by all means you can have a go at me. But I do think consistently across every platform I'm given, I stand for the rights of the marginalised, and I think that's the most important thing. Like, you can tease me for how I sound all you want, but I think if you listen to the substance of what I'm saying, you will know that the substance of what I'm saying is totally and always will be in favour of marginalised, hardworking communities.
Damn straight. Anyway, back to the original comments. QVC says that the scum media tried to blame a BAME resident on the tower, utter vermin in the British press. Yes, so when Grenfell went up in flames, I think it was the Sun that blamed a person who apparently had left something on in the kitchen or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it was immediately, oh, it was individualized. It was a personal mistake, rather than the fact that there was basically the building was built for on the cheap. It was built to please outside richer residents, but those inside can just burning hell, basically. But yeah, I do remember that. That you know, you're not going to expect any different from the right wing media. Jack H, of course, the people coming out with the anti-regulation crap will be making sure that they live in a safe and warm home. I mean, it's very external, isn't it? Of course, we want to scrap regulations, but if Rupert Lowe, or that person in Reform, I forget his name, if he had a family member die in Grenfell, I'm sure they'd have a very different take. I'm aware of the time, so I'm not going to spend too long. I have to say, QVC, you're getting a lot of spotlight today.
Yeah, you're the favourite.
But you had made some good comments. Too much NIMBYism too, and powers to block building. Need new developments with new transport links and services. We need division of the 1945 Labour government. So I agree with the second half, which is absolutely we need like a crusade in changing the economy like 1945. But you say too much NIMBYism. I do think NIMBYism is a problem. I'm opposed to it. But like, again, my view is it's not just about building more houses. It's about building the right housing, which is council houses. Mike, I think this is a good question for you. Obviously, you're a member of the Green Party. You're standing for the Greens tooting. Some people would like to attack the Greens for NIMBYism. QVC is not saying that to you, obviously, but that does happen. So, one, do you think Green councils can sometimes be a bit NIMBY? And two, do you think the charge in NIMBYism is overblown and simply just building a shitload of houses doesn't always solve the issue?
I think definitely historically Greens have had a NIMBY approach at times, and maybe like again because to speak to some of the environmental concerns, like the idea of where you should and shouldn't build. But I think the kind of modern Green Party would very much support a huge building project of social housing. Right, I certainly would support that where I am in Tooting Broadway and in Wandsworth more broadly. I think we definitely need more social housing stock. And look, like people don't like change. Like I sometimes think we can often think of NIMBYism in like very, very negative terms. I think fundamentally human beings are very resistant to like change sometimes, and that might often be where the NIMBYism comes from. I don't think, again, we've spoken about this on the show extensively today. It's not as simple as just like build loads of homes. It's gonna be like all sorted. You build social housing, but crucially for me with the social housing thing, it isn't just about building social housing. That's one part of the story. We need to build more social housing. We need to make sure that private landlords haven't got a complete monopoly over the housing market. And the more social housing there is, the less monopoly they have over the housing market. So fundamentally, that would be a good thing. But we also need to think about the conditions of these social housings are being kind of kept in. And we need to kind of broaden the capacity of councils and in terms of funding and in terms of just the capacity of councils to ensure that council homes, when they're built, are being looked after properly. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to expand housing, because we already have a problem at the moment with the condition of social housing. So we don't want to build more social housing and see that problem kind of become worse and worse in terms of the condition of social housing. We don't want people to be housed in poor homes in terms of mold and other issues. So yeah, I'm all.
Oh, we've lost Mike. Well, I hate when they're in the middle of a monologue. This isn't great. While we wait for Mike to reconnect, Exor says, "Oh my god, I wasn't talking about you personally. Never mind. Apologies. I thought.
No, but I don't know if I actually quite believe that.
But then a lot of people also, not just you, Exit, but a lot of people do say it anyway. But of course, yeah, I apologise if you weren't talking about us personally. Mike,
I think Kirsten is nicer than me.
Maybe. Mike, are you back? I reckon like a laptop battery or something. Okay, let's get more of the comments. Where was I? He will be back. Don't worry.
I think it gets to me because people have consistently attempted to discredit me on the basis of how I talk, and that. Oh, there's another one. What's going on today? What's going on?
I mean, but you know what we do? Oh, you're back. Mike, please, if you
Sorry,
remember where you are, please continue.
I can't remember what the last thing I said was. I was trying to reconnect.
Fair.
But yeah, I guess I just think we need to in building more social housing, we need to also make sure that social housing is looked after, because one of the problems I'm seeing with residents I speak to on the doorstep is not being able to contact the council, not being able to kind of have the issues when it comes to social housing being addressed on time, spending months and months and months going back and forth with the council while their son or daughters living in a bedroom with loads of damp and loads of mold. Like, that's a problem. So yeah, by all means, build more social housing. That will definitely make things much better. That's an easy win for any government, right? You build more social housing, it's definitely going to make things better. But I have real concerns about the condition of social housing, and there is a real stigma around social housing as well. Like, social housing is seen as like a kind of a nasty, kind of like disgusting thing. So I think hopefully over time as well, one of the things that happens is we're able to change the optics and the noise around social housing, because I think it's overwhelmingly, I think, negative about who lives in social housing, etc., etc. And that also is a problem, I think.
As I was saying, we love to bring on comments that disagree with us. We've got a Rupert Lowe supporter, Eric River, says, you hate Rupert Lowe because he is English and wants to live in England, whilst you are not English but also want to live in England. This is why you hate him. Now, I think this is a rarity in which all three people on the show are people of colour. You can't see me, but you know what I look like. So, reaction, is it because we don't like Rupert Lowe? Is it because he's English? And is it because he wants to live in England, even though he already lives in England? Is that why? Do we just hate Rupert Lowe because he's English?
I just think he's wrong. Like, he's wrong. Yeah. I mean, Sarah, what are your thoughts? He's just fundamentally wrong about a lot of things.
Agreed. I know. I agree with you, Mike. He's wrong, and like when we see a policy agenda for this party that he's put into place, then we might be able to take him a little bit more seriously. But you cannot take someone seriously when they do these mammoth tweets and expect that to garner them support. I think that just makes them seem a bit politically point scory, and he also doesn't resonate with me because he's super fucking rich and I'm not, and I think super rich people want to protect super
envy.
rich people. It's not envy, but I do think they want to protect.
Politics of envy.
Yeah, but I do think super rich people tend to be quite greedy, and I think history kind of tells us that. I don't need to look at, there's got to be plenty of Rupert Lowe's that come after Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe's just an example of something that I don't like, and that is super rich people wanted to protect that class of people and not so much the struggle that a lot of us resonate with. That is why I don't like Rupert Lowe.
Eric, we are also English, by the way, unless you mean white people, which, by the way, we don't hate white people. I hate Rupert Lowe, but again, it's for his beliefs. Of course, this is very obvious, and Eric knows that. But again, I love bringing up comments that antagonise us. That one's Gunner says GTA 6 or turn left Twitch affiliate. GTA 6 will come up before we get affiliated to Twitch. Again, I'm so sorry. I'm not picking on you, QVC. It's just because I feel like I actually look at the comment before I look at the name. Most of those 100,000 Restore members are not activists. They have no branch structure and many sign-ups. Maybe Americans. A lot of this stuff is fake and a grift. They won't challenge reform. When they open their website up, I actually did investigate this. So Rupert Lowe was like, oh my God, we've got 50,000 members. Initially, when you go onto their website, you can donate, and that's it. There's no membership form. There's no membership sign-up. So 50,000 people donated. That's not the same as membership, of course. That anyone around the world can do that. Have they started up a membership system? I don't know. Again, it's a thoroughly online thing. Mike, Sarah was kind of saying, I don't really worry about Restore. Not completely. Do you worry about Restore? Or do you think that Restore are just fundamentally an online-only phenomenon?
I don't think they're an online-only phenomenon. I definitely, I wouldn't dismiss them entirely. I do think the biggest threat Restore pose is shifting the Overton window further to the right. Because the whole thing with Restore is they position themselves to the right of reform, and they do occupy at times positions that are like quite scary. And I think if those positions become normalized and they become seen as like justifiable or kind of fair positions to adopt in British politics, that's going to become a problem. So I actually think Restore and Rupert Lowe are a problem in terms of what they could do to the debates in British politics. I think
true.
debates on issues of immigration have already become so coarsened and become so malicious in terms of the tone and content. And I think with Restore Britain, people often think, can it get more malicious and can it get more vindictive and can it get more hostile towards migrants and marginalised communities? It definitely can. So I think that's the threat I think Restore Britain pose. They risk making the political discourse much worse than it already is.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I think I agree with that. Like, I don't see Restore as a threat electorally.
No.
But pushing the Overton window. I mean, we had someone, a fake Boris Johnson advisor. He thinks he was a former Boris Johnson advisor. He just made videos for him. Was on GB News and said there's a white genocide. Remigration's getting spoken about on GB News, which is it's an ethnic nationalist thing, right? Remigration actually means just re-emigrate those who are not white. So it's the Overton window which fucking terrifies me.
Yeah.
Finally from QVC says...
QVC, our favourite today.
You can't go by accent. People can code switch. Curtis is working class. That wasn't the one I wanted to highlight, actually. It was a different one.
Only Curtis is working class. I'm actually a billionaire.
True. QVC says it's about your relationship to the means of production, not your accent, which is absolutely true.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm a Marxist. Of course, I'm going to say that. Autumn Leaves says Mike top bloke. I agree.
He is.
I agree. Michael Askew says we love seeing Mike. And final comment. SWALX, let's just say SW Alex, I don't know. Maybe that was an assumption. Turn left plus whiskey with my nan. Good show.
Love that.
I suppose my love for this comment depends on whether it's a Scotch or a bourbon. If it's a Scotch based bourbon, bourbon should go in a cocktail and not on its own, but that's just me. Mike, you absolutely have to come back on. You are absolutely fantastic. I also think the comment section was really interesting today. We had disagreements on people on our side, which I think is great. But I am going to hand back to you, Sarah. So
thanks,
bye,
Curtis.
everybody.
Bye, everybody. Right, really great comments. Really, really great comments. And also, thank you so much, Mike, for coming on with me today. The start of the 4-day weekend started with a Turn Left show, and we do want to get you back, so please come back soon.
Oh, I definitely will be back on soon. Don't you worry.
Great. Amazing. Thank you so much, Mike, for your incredible analysis. And thank you to all of you, even the disagreeers. You really do, you do make life incredibly exciting when you do disagree. So that is great. But have I written this part in the script? No, I haven't, as per usual. Anyway, I do want to thank you guys for tuning in, for commenting, for subscribing, for donating, for sharing. All of those things are so priceless. So we're really, really grateful. Curtis next? Maybe. Thank you so much for the donation, Rachel. Not really Rachel. But yeah, thanks, guys. It's been a really great time. Just a reminder to, if you want to see us grow, then visit turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p. But we're on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, so I'll see you guys next time.